Welcome to episode 128. I'm Stuart McCullough, I'm the CEO of VHIA. It's time for this week's Industrial Roundup. For this week's Industrial Roundup, we're starting with our discussions with the ANMF and the replacement for the Nurses and Midwives Agreement. We're attending our second meeting with ANMF and representatives of the department to discuss their claims to replace the current agreement. Specifically, we'll be talking about Part E of the current agreement, which covers allowances, including ANMF's claims for new allowances for working in a remote location and holding certain Certificate 4 qualifications, as well as Part F, which include claims around hours of work and the default shift lengths for 8/8/10 with uniform start and finish times across the state. A summary of that discussion will appear on the Yammer page on the Tuesday following the Monday meeting. On Wednesday, we've got a special meeting of our community health members, including an invitation to CEOs and their delegates, and we'll be discussing the objectives for the upcoming Nurses and Midwives bargaining for community health and a specific community health log of claims. On Thursday, there's an SDPP meeting with the AMA, and I anticipate that we'll be talking about the savings schedule process as well as the compendium dispute. As always, all of our activities are summarised through the VHIA Yammer network. And that's it for this week's Industrial Roundup. It's now time for the weekly update.
Welcome to today's weekly update. My name is Jim Babalis, Workplace Relations Legal Officer here at the VHIA. And here today for her first ever podcast, I've got Mary Nguyen, our Workplace Relations Advisor. Hi Mary.
Hi, how are you?
Now Mary, when we start these podcasts, we usually have to identify a clue, which will lead obviously onto what today's topic discussion is. So if you'd like to do the honours and lift the box there.
Woo.
Well, we might introduce this. So Mary, that's a picture of Tom Selleck with a Ferrari. Nothing going there?
Nope.
Okay, this is a picture of Magnum PI, big hit show in the 1980s involving a private investigator, of all things. So I guess that leads us to the theme of today, workplace investigations. Hence why we've got the picture of Tom Selleck.
So, Jim, how do you best define workplace investigations?
Yeah, that's a great question. Essentially, a workplace investigation is a process by which an employer undertakes to make a line of inquiries based on whether certain allegations or workplace issues have actually occurred. This includes, but is not limited to, the following allegations and issues. I guess number one, disciplinary performance issues. Number two, bullying and harassment. 3, workplace culture. And 4, OH&S.
We receive a lot of queries from our members, and in many instances the question is asked, are workplace investigations necessary?
Yeah, I guess the way to view it, and the simple way to answer that question, is that investigations are prescribed in our enterprise agreements. So in that sense, I guess they are important. However, a usual checklist might involve the following considerations as to whether they actually will be necessary. Number one, do the issues themselves relate to events at work? 2, are the allegations with merit or consideration, or are they in fact vexatious? 3, do the allegations raise issues that can be classified, I guess, as breach of contract, workplace policies, codes of conduct, or legislative requirements? And lastly, what are the potential external implications if the allegations are in fact proven?
So, what factors or issues, in your experience, have led to the investigation becoming more complex?
I guess I stated earlier, I guess there's certain themes that do come up from our members, and they are as follows, and there's essentially 5 of them. Number 1, which is the breach of policies, or the breaches, if we call it that, which involves breaches of policies, procedures and code of conduct. Number 2 is allegations of bullying, harassment, including discrimination. 3 is issues of threats, violence and abuse in the workplace. 4 is the refusal to comply with lawful management directions. And lastly is theft, and this can also include theft of intellectual property as well.
What are the preliminary steps of an investigation or the framework of it?
Yeah, at the outset, you need to define whether an investigation is actually appropriate. I guess that's the first thing you have to do. And if so, then you need to determine whether it should be external or internal. An external investigation is usually warranted where matters are more serious, or in a situation where the ultimate decision maker might be prejudiced to some extent in undertaking the process or making a decision themselves. Aside from that, you really will need to identify, I guess, 6 key themes. Number 1, review the complaint and identify the allegations and the material and what has been breached in terms of legislation or policies. 2, draft the letter of allegations, which will then have to go to the respondent, who's the person who responds to the allegations. 3, if necessary and only if serious, stand the employee down or the respondent down from work and essentially place them on administrative leave, paid leave essentially. 4, communicate the process to the complainant as well as the respondent and any other witnesses and arrange the necessary interview times. 5, ensure that all parties are treated fairly in the process and that assistance and support persons are made available. And lastly, put the allegations to the respondent and allow them time to be interviewed and respond accordingly.
You mentioned earlier that investigations can be either internal or external. So what's the difference between the two, and why would you choose internal over the other, or vice versa?
Complex question, but I guess the common theme is an investigation, it needs to be impartial. Impartiality is the key. An internal investigation is usually undertaken, I guess, and it's a good idea, where the employee is trying to contain any fallout and control the process. The usual persons that would undertake such investigations are the HR managers in most instances. I guess one of the key issues around this is, cost complexity as well. An external investigation, I guess, Mary, is a bit more appropriate where sensitive matters or ones that may involve the necessity for external assessment of employee culture or legal advice is warranted. That might involve, I guess, your more high-risk situations where there might be, criminal issues as well. So I guess the more serious the issues, the more warranted an external investigation.
Jim, can you talk to us a bit about procedural issues?
Absolutely. Essentially, the investigation must focus on ascertaining whether the allegations raised are proven or whether they will be proven. In this sense, the allegations must be concise and clear and not vague or viewed as being manufactured. The allegations are also required to be clear and succinct, and this process can essentially be found in the discipline clauses of our EBAs. It is also advisable that the allegations relate to the issues and they do not raise really ancillary, secondary, unrelated matters. How do you ensure fairness? Well, you need to remind yourself that you are impartial in this process, and some key tips that you will need to include will be as follows. Really follow the procedure is number 1. Secondly, maintain confidentiality and provide the witnesses with the confidentiality statements and directives. 3, allow support persons to be part of the process. In many instances, it's unions, and that's prescribed in our EBAs. Thirdly, allow support. You would also, fourthly, you need to allow breaks as well as emotional support facilities, etc. And that can be, EAP processes. The fifth process involves provide evidence where applicable, and lastly, maintain open and transparent communication.
Jim, how do you determine the validity of these allegations?
Yeah, essentially, I guess it's really this is where I guess the legal component comes in. The test that is applied is the civil standard of evidence, or what is known, I guess, in legal parlance as the Brugenshaw test. This allows the investigator to determine the evidence on the balance of probabilities, as opposed to beyond reasonable doubt, which is the criminal standard. Determining on the balance of probabilities and making this clear in the process also ensures that fairness has been met. In short, it involves, I guess, the following 3 factors. Number 1, that the test is on the balance of probabilities. Secondly, how likely it is that the allegation has actually occurred. And lastly, how serious the issue really is. And I guess when you're making the findings, you must list whether they are substantiated or unsubstantiated.
And how do you prepare those findings?
Yeah, the investigation really needs to capture the information that the witnesses have provided, as well as the information and documentation considered. And the report must be marked as privileged or confidential and must list the following factors or the following components. Number 1, what the instructions are. Number 2, the background. Number 3, the allegations themselves. Number 4, the methodology, i.e. who was interviewed, when and where. 5, commentary on witness statements. I guess whether you want to make any additional comments about, aspects of workplace culture that the witnesses raise, or essentially how good a witness is in terms of, I guess, the information provided. 6, you want to make some commentary about the findings. And lastly, the recommendations. The report should also contain, I guess, an executive summary and a summary that is provided to the respondent.
That sounds like a really long and complex process. Have you got any final thoughts for us, Jim?
Yeah, I guess if I could leave any final thoughts is, it's important to be impartial and thorough, as well as fair and transparent. And this essentially will make the process easier and more effective.
Thanks, Jim.
Pleasure. Thanks, Mary.
VHIA.